you have the ability to let your CAC rise fast and still be profitable. Brands that scale really fast and profitably engineer strong 3 to 6 month LTV into their products from day one.
At the end of the day, CAC does go up, but sometimes it almost looks worse than it is. You have to make sure you're looking at the right metrics.
Dylan, episode 30, what's up, man?
We're talking about CAC today, John. It's a fun one. I spend a lot of my week talking about CAC, so I hope I'm ready for it.
Okay, so most D2C founders that I come across just in the ecosystem, they're super obsessed with lowering CAC. But what if I told you that's exactly why you can't scale profitably? What would you say to that, Dylan?
I'd say that's sometimes true.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the name of the game being increasing CAC. Now, what Dylan just said is important. This is sometimes true, but we want to focus in on this topic because there are a lot of brands that I encounter that just kind of have this blanket understanding of like, I need to manage my CAC, and managing my CAC means keeping it low. And the reality is that may be the case for some brands, but when we're talking about the intersection of scaling really fast and really profitably, that's the context of this conversation. How to scale really fast and really profitably. What I see time and time again, the brands that can do that are the brands that can absorb an increasing CAC as they scale ad spend. So that being said, I'd love to start first, Dylan, around like just explaining in layman's terms for all of us that are not ad buyers, why does, generally speaking, if you're scaling ad spend fast, why does CAC increase?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, let's say I'll use Meta as an example. If you're spending $1,000 a day, Meta is going to go and try to find you the cheapest cost per conversion if you're bidding for highest volume in this hypothetical scenario at that budget. If you go and spend $10,000 per day, in all likelihood, that cost per purchase will go up because you're going further and further away from the absolute ideal prospect per day that Meta thinks that can get you the best cost per purchase. So there's that element of, as you scale, you're getting further and further away from that absolute perfect target customer. And then over time, there's other things at play like creative fatigue, cost of advertising going up via CPMs that also impact things. But by and large, over time, as you spend more money on ads, your cost per purchase will go up, barring that you don't find any opportunities for improvement. But that finding opportunities for improvement, while possible, I believe is often not gone about in a way where they're actually likely to be improvements. So I think what John's trying to get to here is essentially, I'll give you an example. Would I rather do if I have 50% gross margins, so I break even if I have a 2 ROAS, would I rather do 100K a day in sales at a 2.5 ROAS or 20K a day in sales at a 2.6 ROAS? One, you have less efficiency than the other, but you're driving way more volume so that to the point you're making more profit dollars. And you can flip a scenario like that from a CAC standpoint too. But the general premise is that part of this game is understanding that your CAC will probably go up unless you're some unicorn. And those can sometimes happen if you have like some crazy referral effects from new customers, but they are incredibly rare and often not always super durable. But like that is essentially the premise, if I'm getting it right, John.
There's so many things you said that I want to dive into, but I think I want to just remind everyone, we're talking about the context of, hey, I have a brand, I want to scale really fast and profitably, right? I call that like having your cake and eating it too in D2C. And the reason I'm bringing this up, I'm not bringing this up for some random reason so that me and Dylan can sound smart. We're just two average dudes, so you're not going to get that. I'm bringing this up because I hear it all the time. Like, and I get asked it all the time. How do I scale fast and profitably? And there's more to the story, which we're going to dig into over the next 25 minutes or so. But I would say if I were to give you one answer, it's that you have the ability to let your CAC rise fast and still be profitable. And what we're going to talk about is how do you do that, right? What do we see in brands that can absorb an increase in CAC as they scale ad spend fast, which drives fast top line growth, but still remain incrementally and increasingly profitable? And so if you haven't listened to episode 29, go back and listen to that. That was last week, and we laid the groundwork for this. But basically, in a nutshell, in my opinion, brands that scale really fast and profitably, they engineer either, I'll say, they engineer strong 3 to 6 month LTV and or high gross margin dollars per order into their products from day one. They're thinking about this intentionally on the front end because it's the intersection or the multiplication or the intertwining of those two factors that allow them to absorb higher CAC profitably as they scale fast. Dylan, what do you agree with that? What do you see on your end?
Yeah, I think that that is like generally true. I think here's the thing, all of these statements apply to an extent. Like at a certain point, your CAC may get to a place where you physically cannot justify it anymore. But for a lot of great brands, especially in like the mid seven figures to like lowish eight figures. Sometimes, literally, if you change nothing, but you just get better financial analysis in place and can understand CAC to LTV and how contribution margin and profit compounds over time, you can come to a realization where it's like literally the only thing I have to do here is spend more money. Even if our CAC rises by 25 bucks over the next year in this kind of growth plan, I still make way more profit and growth is crazy. But maybe if it rises 60 bucks over the next 2 years, we're going to have some issues. Oftentimes, when you have a really, really healthy DSC brand and you're in that like like mid seven figure range to low eight figures, just dialing in some of these metrics can allow you to squeeze out way more profit dollars. And then the other thing I would say is like, and this is often where I think that a lot of operators get it wrong, is a lot of the times when you're like mid seven figures to low eight figures, you have like one or a few hero offers slash products that have gotten you there. And the reality is that if you just keep on launching more ad creative and do more tests to try and drive down your CAC, if you've launched like 300 tests or 500 tests or insert some large number here, you reach a point where the probability of you getting a dramatically different outcome is just going to be really, really low.
Yeah.
So when that occurs, you have to be honest with yourself. What are the bets I want to take? Because the probability of your next move equating to the outcome you want all of a sudden goes down because you're trying more new things. You should still test a crazy number of high quality creative. But if you actually want to start finding like the next channel or the next incremental dollar where CAC can be acceptable, I think that's when you have to start thinking about other channels. But more commonly, because especially if you're meta focused, it's rare that other channels can outperform without any respect to any like meaningful volume, is like new products and new offers. I think that like a lot of people do not turn on the new product launching machine early enough when they're scaling their D2C brands. And I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but the answer to a lot of brands is yes, increasing CAC can drive more profit for you. And then ideally, that additional profit, you then turn around some of those dollars and start trying to find other winning offers that you can continue to scale. There are some exceptions here. Like if you have ridiculous LTV, sometimes you can put off the product expansion game like further into the future. But I think that product strategy is growth strategy at its core, because
Yeah.
without good product, you can't have good storytelling and good marketing, and you can't be a layer below that have good execution.
Well, what you just said is actually the essence of this whole topic. This is not a financial topic. The financials are the outcome, right? The point that I was making in like setting the stage for this conversation is that when you're intentionally on the product development side of things on the front end, you are, amongst other things, you are accounting for and designing in strong LTV and strong gross margin dollars per order. The outcome is you may be enabled economically, right, to scale fast and profitably. Too many brands come to me on the back end. Product development's already done, and they're like, Jon, how do I do this? And I'm like, the product the product catalog you guys have doesn't lend to this, right? Now, I want to mention something here. I'm trying to start off with an extreme, scale super fast and profitably to make a point, right? But understand that every brand is on the spectrum. I've worked with several brands who I've seen like spend millions of dollars a month on Meta. I had a brand I was the CFO for in the early days of Free to Grow. We went from 1.8 million to 35 million in 1 year. And they did not have strong LTV, almost none, but they had ridiculous gross margin dollars per order. So they could absorb that increase in CAC. Incrementally, they're making less and less dollars on each order, but it was positive. And as long as they had a free flow of inventory and could finance it, right, it was accretive to the bottom line because it wasn't driving more overhead to the business. Eventually, they ran into other problems. They did reach this point where CAC did become a problem. And because they didn't have strong 3 to 6 month LTV, they had to go back to the drawing board thinking about product. They were trying to design in LTV. They had to start thinking about different sales channels, right? Namely physical retail. And it caused a lot of issues for them. So I don't want everyone to hear like what I said at the beginning of this episode and be like, perfect, I'm going to design this into the product and I'm just going to build this massive brand. There's still constraints, but if you don't solve the LTV and or high gross margin dollars per order on the front end, you're not even going to have a chance to really hit that ceiling and have to figure out that problem at a high revenue level. So what I want to talk about next is adjusting your speed, right? You may find a speed that's working. Like for example, that brand I was working with that went from 1.8 to 35 million in 1 year. But then some wheels can start falling off. You start hitting these different constraints. You mentioned one with not being proactive enough on new product development. Are there any other constraints or issues that you start seeing the wheels falling off if a brand stays growing too fast for too long?
Yeah, I think that like one opinion that I've grown over time is I think if you are a business that has really low LTV, I think that you are it is important that you do two things. One, I think you should purposefully run with like almost like overly lean Opex because I think that like in an example where you have like really high growth like that, that's great. Like I'm not even opposed to going fast in that scenario if it can mean you can drive more profit dollars. But like in the scenario where you're growing like crazy and you're super profitable, you have to remind yourself that fundamentally what you are right now as a business is a Facebook ad arbitrage. And that may be okay. And that may last a very long time, especially if you have a truly differentiated product that it's hard for people to come in and copy. But if you don't have a truly differentiated product, that's probably just going to make things worse for you. So you have to be very diligent about making sure that you realize the profits you want to, because the long-term payoff may be less, unless you can fundamentally build that offer into a durable business by
Totally.
reinvesting the profits into other bets. If you're a low LTV business and you're growing like crazy, I believe going to physical retail faster is more important because
Totally.
that, if done right, can present more predictable and durable revenue, in my opinion,
And
with less
even be a little bit of
volatility.
like a brand moat that like you got into Target and you're the premier brand in Target for that product category, right?
Additionally, like let's say you have 15% of your revenue as OPEX, so as like fixed costs. In many cases, if you're not vertically integrated too high, but I can live with that if I have high LTV because I can
Totally.
build systems and processes around it and grow into it. If I have revenue that has the potential to go like huge swings because I am again just at the mercy of advertising platform efficiency day to day, week to week, I am much more comfortable having really lean OpEx and having way more variable expenses. Like in terms of like even how I staff my team, like I'd rather have like more freelancers that I can kind of bring on and bring off as needed versus full time in house. And then the other thing, I'm way more likely to try to diversify my product catalog faster because the other way you can make D2C work a long time is you kind of think of these like almost like products as like bets. And
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm going to try to make all these products grow and be sustainable. But I'm going to also realize that I have pretty big single point of failure risks because if something happens and all of a sudden my CAC goes up by 20% and there goes all my profit margin, I have to have multiple products that are fundamentally working standalone. So I
Totally.
think that like if I have low LTV, I'm trying to get like 5+ winning products as fast as possible, and that might take you 5 years
Totally.
on testing. And I'm trying to go to physical retail as fast as possible. And I just like and I'm trying to maximize the profits, like you're saying. But I'm being really honest. Like I don't think this is going to last forever, with the sole exception of like truly differentiated product. Like if you have like a patent that is
Totally.
fundamentally better than every other competitor that no one else can copy, and it's defensible, that is, there's still risks, but it de-risks the situation a lot.
Okay, so you just explained a lot that I went through firsthand with that brand, right? And so let's talk about the finance side of some of the things you just brought up. So when we got through that $35 million a year, the target that the business set internally was like, let's break 50 million this next year, right? It was April of that year that CAC just fell apart, shot up. We were not turning a profit. We had to pull ad spend back to begin turning a profit at an order level.
Don't tell me there was a large purchase order. I'm scared.
There were definitely some large purchase orders. There was definitely some negotiating that had to happen on the supply chain. But this is what I told the founder. You need to start taking as much cash out of this business as you possibly can. That's your financial upside right now until we have meaningful confidence that we can figure out LTV, or we can figure out another channel, or we can get these other products launched. Because this in particular was a device that has compliance challenges. It has to get approved by some government agencies. So like launching new products in and of itself had a baked in longer lead time, right? And longer and more risk because of that, like compliance with government agencies. And so I told the founders, like, hey, we're still profitable. Going back to your overhead example, we're running at less than 10% overhead. So like, yes, it was a big hit to growth, but we still were turning a profit. The business was by no means in the red on a monthly basis. But I was like, we need to be very mindful of inventory strategy, and you should be distributing as much cash to yourself as we can, and without putting the business at risk. We should be very aggressive in our, like, aggressively lean with our working capital management. Not because that's what I want to do to the business, but because I don't see the ROI of keeping that capital in the business and potentially actually losing it because incrementally our ROI keeps going down every single month. Get that cash out. And so here's the thing. During that time, like the next 18 months, he was able to take $6 to $7 million out of the business. Now, he had dreams at one point of selling it for 100 million. We were talking to private equity groups and everything, but all of them walked away because they saw CAC increasing every single month and there was no LTV. And they're like, there was a couple who said, if you get into physical retail, even though you don't have LTV, we might purchase the brand or make a meaningful minority recapitalization investment. But because all that was uncertain, the financial strategy for wealth building was take as much money out of this business as you possibly can. Don't stop trying to figure out these issues, right? We're not going to just bleed the company dry, lever it up with debt, and walk away. There's still potential. We still have 500,000 customers. Like, that's how many customers this brand had. That's still valuable if we can figure out how to monetize it. In my opinion, that was the right financial strategy. Take chips off the table. You still made $6-7 million. Invest that somewhere else. It may not be complete life-changing money, but you could be work optional at having $6 to $7 million in a portfolio of different, investments. What's the takeaway from a financial strategy or like a capital allocation standpoint? Like you were mentioning, hey, I would be willing to run a little hotter on fixed overhead, and I would even say inventory if I had a high LTV, right? Why? Because there's some ROI upside or IRR upside that exists in that growing base of repeat customers that represents less risk. So I'm willing to push some more chips into the game. But when I don't have that, it's higher risk. I want to get those chips off the table and I want to put them in my bank account or invest them elsewhere until I can reduce risk within the business. That's the takeaway.
I think that our industry has matured a lot in the last couple of years, because I think that a lot of the brands now that are starting, like the reality is that when you are like low seven figures or even like scaling to low eight figures, there are some instances where you truly are a Facebook arbitrage. And I think it's important that as an operator, you realize that is what you are, and that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that is what you will be in the business's final form. But if you want to build a durable entity, you have to then go and make it a durable entity. And I still come across some of the operators they're in the business of realizing that they're going to have a business that's going to work for a year or two, and often it's still drop shipping or something similar, and they know once it works, people are going to copy them, and they're going to start another business. Like, I still meet people whose
I meet a
main
ton of
thing is
those
that,
guys, man.
yeah, it's like they're still ripping. Honestly, it's not for me. That sounds like it sounds like playing the game on hard mode in some ways, but maybe I just don't get it. But they're good at one thing: distributing cash and just pulling cash out like crazy, and then be okay. This one's done. It ain't working anymore. Let me go to the next one. And I think if you're trying to like get optimal returns, you have to be honest with yourself when you realize when that is the game you're playing. But at the same time, know that these bets are inherently risky because they're not necessarily backed in data. They're backed in intuition, which is fundamentally entrepreneurship. So it's a, I'm going to end my statement with it's a balance.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because we have a group of brands that we've worked with over the years that do that. They're all buddies. They've all referred each other to
Yeah,
us, and they scale. It's crazy. They scale the brand from like 0 to 10 million really fast, and they're ad wizards, right? They get ads, they get creative, they get offers, and they'll get to 10 million and they'll make like 7 figures in profit along the way. They'll take every last penny of it out of the business, and then as soon as CAC like blows up, then they just literally liquidate the rest of the inventory, shut down the LLC. But they've already got like 3 other new LLCs that they've been testing on the side. And like one of them just stopped recently, and he's like, "Don't worry, man, I'll be back in a couple of months, and I'll need you guys again." But I scale, and like, and again, not the game for me, but more power to them.
Yeah, no, seriously, it can work. The business model there is literally like finding those arbitrages and realizing that it is an arbitrage. And if that's the game
Yeah,
you want to play, it's a game you can play. We could have added that game to the episode of games, John. We
for
didn't.
sure.
It's not as common, but we could have added it in.
There's one other thing I was thinking of as we were talking about like adjusting speed. Um, it's that like definitely in the flywheel, we've talked a lot about the financial side, right? But the reality is the customer experience can't break down. You can't go so fast that the customer experience starts break down on the ops side. Like you start running out of inventory and you're chronically out of inventory and not doing a good job of managing that, or packages are going to the wrong place or showing up late, or you're not getting back to support tickets. That can kill the scale no matter how great the 3 to 6 month LTV and or gross margin dollars per order are. You have to do a great job on the CX side. And D2C, in my opinion, is a channel that's uniquely suited to, if you know how to operate, providing a superior customer experience to other channels. And so you cannot let that suffer as you're scaling super fast. Because if your product starts not meeting the promises that you're making, if you're not meeting the promises from an operational standpoint and you're just not doing customer service right, all of these great financial economics that we've laid out that you intentionally baked into the product, it could all go away because you're not keeping up the customer experience. Have you ever seen that happen, Dylan?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, the worst example is if you have a high LTV brand, like make sure you have enough product to ship out to subscribers. Like that's like the key thing.
Totally.
I don't see that mistake happen very often, but that is like the worst. Um, but yeah, you have to make sure that you're, maintaining a quality customer experience. And yeah, I think that like when it comes to like the shipping experience, I mean that's a whole other kind of conversation, but literally just how your package arrives. Are you having like refer a friend cards added? Are you highlighting other things that people could buy from you? And that like there's so much you can do from a creativity standpoint in D2C that I think really elevates the customer experience. And packaging can make a huge difference. And some of those little details do get forgotten at scale.
Man, this was a fun one. I've been thinking about this a lot, and so I was really excited to talk about this. Are there any other final thoughts that you have on this topic, Dylan?
as CAC increases, it's generally not going to be remotely close to linear. So one of the most frequent mistakes I see is if you're a brand that, let's say you're like, let's say Facebook has not been your primary channel, or maybe it's like one of the main channels, but there's like a healthy media mix. When you first scale from say a few K a day to, let's say you're going from 2K a day to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10K a day, depending on how you measure things, your in-platform CAC will likely get a lot worse really fast. And the reason why, if you have your audiences set up, you can do this. You can break down audience segments. And the accuracy here is sometimes a little bit debatable, but we'll, for the sake of example, assume it's pretty accurate. You have your new customer audience, your new audience, your engaged, and your existing customers. And oftentimes, what happens is if you scale fast, keyword fast, that's the word Jon has used a few times, is what will happen is temporarily of those three audience types, your new audience as a percentage of the total audience will go up a lot. And
Sure.
not really unfortunately, just reality is the CAC on that is going to generally be the highest. And because of that, it will bring up your CAC in platform. However, that efficiency decrease will probably be far greater than the true efficiency decrease you experience in new customer efficiency, which you can help validate in like a triple L or a North Beam or something else, or even just in Facebook by looking at that specific line. So at the end of the day, CAC does go up, but sometimes it almost looks worse than it is when you're going from kind of like stagnant to slow growth to fast growth. So you have to make sure you're looking at the right metrics. That's all I'm going to say. And then in terms of thinking about CAC and degradation over time, that's a whole other can of worms. But I think the most common mistake in the kind of measurement and forecasting of CAC, that is where people most frequently get held up. And I'm mostly sharing that to not get scared and try not to look at the Facebook reporting sometimes.
I love it, man. Um, yeah, this is a great topic, super relevant because I hear people bring up these questions time and time again. I think my kind of final thought that we haven't touched on yet is like make sure that your inventory planning team is ready for hyperscale. There's a lot of things that break as you're scaling super fast, but the one that I see most frequently break is supply. And it's because of not being proactive in the communication of expectations up and down the supply chain, and also not having finance with a seat at the table to help you understand like how are you going to keep up with the inventory growth from a cash flow standpoint. And there's a lead time to doing things like getting inventory financing. You don't just like flip a switch and you have debt financing for inventory. And so like make sure that when you are hyper scaling ad spend and it's profitable at the contribution margin level, that you have a representative from the inventory planning team at the table and you have a representative from the finance team at the table, because it really is going to take growth marketing, inventory planning, and cash planning, and possibly capital structure management to keep up with hyper growth. And it would be a shame to leave money on the table if you've built in on the front end through product development this great LTV and this great gross margin dollars per order because you failed on the operations or finance side of the business. So at the end of the day, you cannot separate growth marketing from ops and finance. One of the big reasons why we have this podcast and have so much fun getting nerdy about these conversations. But all in all, I think this was a great one, Dylan. That's a wrap for episode 30.